The Democrats pushing through a massive $3.5 trillion reconciliation measure. Now, nearly every House committee has held marathon sessions this week, running multiple days to consider amendments to this massive spending package. Yesterday, the House Committee on Energy and Commerce concluded its session, which began on Monday. Unsurprisingly, the Democrats are stuffing the bill full of new abortion funding, among other things. Here to talk about it is Congressman Joyce. He represents the 13th District of Pennsylvania and is a member of the House Energy and Commerce Committee, and he is also a part of the Republican Doctors Caucus. Congressman, welcome to the program.
Tony, it's great to be with you today.
Okay, describe for our listeners and viewers what happened in the Energy and Commerce Committee session this week.
Well, these were long markup sessions, and it was my honor to stand with fellow Republicans under the leadership of Cathy McMorris Rodgers, where we stood for the Hyde Amendment and ultimately for the sanctity of human life. Democrats tried to use this markup as a way to force abortion into health insurance plans. I'm a physician. That's my training, and that's what I practiced for over 25 years. And they did not realize that Democrats didn't understand that 60% of Americans agree with the Hyde Amendment. This is common sense legislation. And even in the past, Joe Biden agreed with it for most of his career in the Senate. This legislation, the Hyde Amendment, has been part of the budget for the past 40 years. As a physician, I took the Hippocratic Oath, first to do no harm, but also to defend life at every level. And so by forcing this debate on the amendment in the middle of the night, because they know that their position is unpopular with the American people, and they want to ram that in to this $3.5 trillion piece of legislation. This was a way that the Democrats, very calculated, wanted to force abortion into health insurance plans.
I think people need to understand the significance of this moment. As you made reference, the Hyde Amendment has been a bipartisan rider on the appropriations bill for nearly 40 years. Both parties have agreed. Maybe they disagreed on the substance of abortion, but they agreed that taxpayers and Americans shouldn't be forced to fund something they're morally opposed to. This is a new day. That's not even being considered by the Democratic Party.
The Hyde Amendment, to your point, Tony, and spot on, prevents your and my tax dollars from being used to pay for abortions. And so in the wee hours of the morning, the Democrats forced that into this reconciliation. It was such an unfortunate event to be part of this markup, to realize that this was occurring right in our face. And we discussed this. This was part of the discussion Cathy McMorris Rodgers, the Republican leader, brought into it, the sanctity of union life. I spoke to it as a physician, understanding that our responsibilities are to protect life. And yet the Democrats threw away the tradition of 40 years of not allowing federal tax dollars to be used to support abortions. We have a responsibility to protect human life, and that occurs on a federal level as well. This was a compromise that has been used for over 4 decades to not allow taxpayer dollars to support abortions.
Congressman Joyce, has there ever been a more pro-abortion bill advanced in Congress than what is being pushed forward right now?
Not to my knowledge. The Hyde Amendment protection has always been there, and it is gravely disappointing that the Democrats do not respect the sanctity of human life.
Now, beyond the life issue, which is quite significant, quite frankly, and I'm glad the court is looking at that upcoming in the Dobbs case, but we're talking $3.5 trillion. Was there any hesitancy about what we're doing to the economy and the debt that we're amassing as a nation?
Not on the Democrat side. And you make an excellent point. That debt is no longer just for our children, that's for our grandchildren. And incurring debt and not taking the responsibility. As legislators, we have a responsibility to be stewards of the taxpayer dollar. And this reckless spending, which amounts to initially $3.5 trillion and will go higher, this reckless spending must be addressed. And yet the Democrats are turning away from that. They're promising everything at every level. This cannot continue to occur. This will have ramifications today, tomorrow, and into the future.
I mean, when you look at the numbers, okay, numbers don't lie. When you look at the economy, you look at the unemployment numbers. I mean, you go back just a few years with the American Jobs Act, when we actually cut taxes, when the Trump administration cut taxes, we saw people lifted out of poverty. We saw jobs created. We saw the economy humming. We're doing the opposite now. I mean, why is there any thought that we'll get something different than what we have right now? High unemployment, inflation, high prices. Quite frankly, I think most of the American people don't understand what's driving the Democratic-controlled Congress.
And that Democratic controlled Congress is allowing inflation to continue to spiral out of control, which is another tax on individuals. Biden said he's not going to tax anyone who makes under $400,000. But with increasing costs for food, for gasoline, for energy, that is a tax that he is not taking responsibility for. We're seeing this occur under the Biden administration and under the Democrat-controlled Congress. They have to step up and realize that we are turning our backs on the American working class people. This is not the time to be doing this. This is the time to allow innovation and control and restraint to come into the picture.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, Tony, we're not seeing that in Washington from the Democrats.
Not at all. Not in the least bit. Congressman Joyce, we're talking about the issue of abortion. This is the most pro-abortion administration in history. Of course, last week, filing suit, the Department of Justice filing suit against the state of Texas for their heartbeat bill, which would simply says that after a heartbeat is detected, that an abortion cannot be obtained in most cases. The same day is when President Biden unveiled his vaccine mandate, denying Americans a choice as to what to inject into their own body, but at the same time, the same day, arguing that a woman has a right to take the life of another human being. I mean, should Americans, be even possibly contemplating that these decisions are being made by science? To me, it looks like it's all about politics and power.
And it's unfortunately, what we're seeing is we're seeing an oxymoron and a distraction from the real issues that are at hand. We need to come through this pandemic. We understand the importance of vaccines. I'm a physician, that's my training. But we as Americans still have freedoms, and every individual has that right to decide whether a vaccine is right for them. And yet we're looking in Washington at allowing individual liberties to continue to be removed. By executive order, Biden put that in for companies that employ over 100 individuals. We're seeing a grave backlash on that in Pennsylvania, throughout the United States. Individuals still have the rights that are guaranteed to them by the Constitution. Those freedoms must be upheld.
As a physician, Dr. Joyce, do you think this is going to have the opposite reaction of what is desired here, more Americans being vaccinated? Do you think this is actually going to drive down the vaccination numbers?
I think time's going to tell. What we're looking to see is it's fought in the courts and felt to be unconstitutional. A mandate like this by executive order should not be enforced by Biden and his administration. There will be court battles, and I think they will be successful.
All right, Congressman Joyce, thanks so much for joining us today. Appreciate
Tony,
your fight on Capitol Hill for the unborn.
All right. God bless you.
Thank you. Congressman John Joyce of Pennsylvania.